The 22nd of June, 1941. With 134 divisions at full fighting strength, and 73 more divisions for deployment behind the front, Nazi Germany, under the codename Operation Barbarossa, invades the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. Hitler considers the invasion as part of his plan to provide the German nation with Lebensraum, meaning living space, and an opportunity to destroy communism, which he loathes. In the first 6 weeks after the German attack, the Soviet Union sees catastrophic military losses, and during the war the German armies eventually capture some 5.7 million Soviet Red Army troops. Among them is a man who will participate in the uprising in the Sobibor killing center, during which he will brutally kill 2 of 11 members of the camp's SS staff. The soldier's name is Simjon Rosenfeld. Simjon Moiseyevich Rosenfeld, the son of a tailor, was born on the 1st of October 1922 in the Ukrainian village of Ternivka. Simjon had 2 sisters, and as a child he lived through the man-made Ukrainian famine, also known as the Holodomor, that ravaged Soviet Ukraine in the early 1930s and killed millions of Ukrainians. Young Simjon grew up in his native village and attended a Jewish school, which was transformed into a Ukrainian one in 1936. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France stood by their guarantee of Poland's border and declared war on Germany 2 days later. However, Poland found itself fighting a 2-front war when the Soviet Union invaded the country from the east on the 17th of September. The Polish government fled the country that same day, and after heavy shelling and bombing, Warsaw officially surrendered to the Germans on the 28th of September 1939. In accordance with a secret protocol to their non-aggression pact, Germany and the Soviet Union partitioned Poland on the 29th of September, and the last resistance of Polish units ended on the 6th of October. In 1940, Simjon graduated from secondary school, and at the age of 18 was recruited to the Red Army, where he served in the 150th Heavy Artillery Regiment. On the 22nd of June 1941, less than 2 years after the beginning of the Second World War, Nazi Germany, under the codename Operation Barbarossa, invaded the Soviet Union, its ally in the war against Poland. In June 1941, Rosenfeld's regiment stood between the cities of Minsk and Baranovichi, then part of the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic. Rosenfeld was wounded during heavy fighting and captured by the Germans, becoming a prisoner of war. The SS put him in the Minsk Ghetto, where for 2 years he had to perform hard physical labor. The Germans had established the Minsk Ghetto in the northwestern part of Minsk in late July 1941, and about 80,000 people, including Jews from nearby towns, were crowded there. Between November 1941 and October 1942, the German government deported nearly 24,000 Jews from Germany, Austria, and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia to Minsk. The SS and police authorities shot or gassed in special gas vans, most of them upon arrival in Mali Trostinets, a small village about 8 miles to the east. The German occupation authorities housed the others in a separate section of the ghetto in Minsk, segregated from local Belarusian Jews. Little contact was permitted between residents of the 2 ghettos. The Germans destroyed the Minsk Ghetto in the fall of 1943. While the SS killed about 4,000 remaining Jews at Mali Trostinets, there were some Jews, including Simjon Rosenfeld, who were taken by train to Lublin in German-occupied Poland at what would be the Majdanek concentration camp. However, after waiting for a day at the camp gates, they were told that there was no room and they would be taken to Sobibor. When a Polish train worker told them they were to be gassed and cremated there, no one believed him. The occupants of Rosenfeld's railcar had even opened a hole in the bottom of the car to use as a toilet, and they could have escaped through it. Yet nobody did, because they could not believe that they were all going to be killed. When they arrived at the camp labeled Sobibor, it was too late. German SS and police authorities constructed Sobibor in the spring of 1942. It was the second of 3 killing centers established as part of Operation Reinhard, the code name for the German plan to murder the Jews of the general government. It was implemented by the SS and police leader in Lublin, SS General Odilo Globocnik. At its largest extension, the camp covered a rectangular area of 1,312 by 1,969 feet. Branches woven into the barbed wire fence and trees planted around the perimeter camouflaged the site, and a 50-feet-wide minefield surrounded the camp. Deportations to Sobibor were conducted between May 1942, when the regular gassing operations began, and the fall of 1943. Most of the Jews brought to Sobibor were immediately gassed by carbon monoxide, which had been piped into the gas chambers from an engine. About 250,000 victims were murdered in this killing center. From each transport, camp officials chose a small handful of prisoners who appeared fit or skilled to supplement the forced labor supply at Sobibor. Simjon was put to work hauling bricks. When Rosenfeld's transport arrived in Sobibor in September 1943, everyone was herded off the train. Rosenfeld later recalled that the Germans had separated the non-Jewish soldiers from the Jewish ones, but the SS were afraid to shoot them because they were still considered war prisoners. In total, there were 80 Jews from Minsk in Sobibor. Later, when one of the prisoners asked a German guard at the camp where the rest of their friends from the train were, he pointed at the smoking chimney and answered, "There." As early as the beginning of 1943, Jewish prisoners at Sobibor began to fear for their lives because the murderous operations at Sobibor were coming to an end. The Sobibor prisoners knew what was awaiting them since the Belzec prisoners, who did the same work as they did, had sewn messages into their clothing before they were killed by the Sobibor guards, who had shot them the same day they arrived in the camp. The next day, the Sobibor prisoners found all their clothing full of blood. Chaim Engel, a Polish Jewish prisoner, found a note in a pocket which read, "We worked at Belzec for 1 year and did not know where we would be sent next. They said it would be Germany. Now we are in Sobibor and know what to expect. Be aware that you will be killed also. Avenge us." And they did. In response, the prisoners organized a resistance group in the late spring of 1943. This group was augmented in numbers and military training skills by the arrival of the Jewish Red Army prisoners of war from the Minsk Ghetto. The prisoners finally had the necessary expertise to pull off an escape. When Alexander Pechersky, the leader of the planned uprising, asked Simjon Rosenfeld if he was capable of killing a man with an axe, Rosenfeld, then 21 years old, responded, "I am not capable of killing a human being, but I can kill a Nazi." The targets were carefully selected, and the first person to be assassinated by the prisoners was the deputy commandant of Sobibor, Johann Niemann, who was the highest-ranking SS officer on duty that day. With approximately 600 prisoners left in the camp, those who knew the plan initiated the revolt on the 14th of October 1943 at 4 p.m. Niemann was killed by the Soviet prisoner of war Alexander Shubayev, who buried the axe into the back of his head, splitting his skull open. He was dead on the spot. At 4:15 p.m., Oberscharführer Siegfried Graetschus, the German in charge of the Ukrainian Ternivka guards, arrived at the cobbler's shop to pick up his order. While one prisoner held the Nazi's leg in a firm grip, pretending to pull the boots, Simjon Rosenfeld and his fellow prisoner, Arkady Weisspapier, slipped out from the back room and split the skull of the Nazi with an axe. Then his deputy, the Ukrainian guard Raiklat, entered, calling his boss to the telephone. He, too, was attacked and killed. 1 hour after the uprising began, a total of 11 SS officers were killed by the rebels. Chaos then took over. The prisoners had to escape by climbing over a barbed wire fence or by running out the main gate through a minefield under heavy machine gun fire. Some stepped on mines, some gave up and did not run at all. Simjon Rosenfeld did run. He later recalled, "I was not afraid because I didn't have time to think about fear. I only thought about life." Around 300 prisoners succeeded in breaking out of the killing center that day. Approximately 100 were caught in the dragnet that followed the uprising. Some 50 prisoners, however, escaped Sobibor and survived the war. Following the uprising, on Heinrich Himmler's orders, the SS and Travniki-trained guards shot the remaining prisoners, razed the extermination site of the camp, buried all evidence, and planted trees to disguise the area. Among those who were not caught was also Simjon Rosenfeld, with a small group of people that included former inmates of Sobibor and Jews who had escaped German murder operations. He hid in the woods for 11 months. In late July 1944, 9 months after the uprising, the Red Army liberated the city of Chelm, located about 50 kilometers from Sobibor. Soviet soldiers found Rosenfeld 2 months later in the nearby vicinity, and not long after, he asked the Soviet command to send him to the front lines. However, the Soviets doubted whether he had really survived 2 years of captivity. After careful screening by the Soviet counterintelligence unit SMERSH, Simjon Rosenfeld was sent to fight on the First Belarusian Front. He took part in the crossing of the Vistula River and during the battle for the city of Poznan in the winter of 1944 to 1945, Simjon was seriously wounded. He narrowly avoided having a limb amputated when a young Jewish medical intern advised him to decline the operation. After being released from hospital, Rosenfeld was now deemed unfit for combat and was sent to Berlin as a commander of a unit guarding army food supplies. There, he met the end of the war. He scratched the following inscription on a column of the Reichstag, the German parliament: Baranovici, Sobibor, Berlin. In 1945, Rosenfeld was awarded the medals for combat services and for courage, and he returned to Ukraine, to his place of birth, Ternivka. There he found that his entire family had been shot by the Germans in late May 1942. When he learned that his uncle in a nearby town was still alive, he went there. On the 15th of January 1946, Simjon married his uncle's daughter, Yevgenia. They settled in the Ukrainian town of Gaivoron, where Simjon worked as the head of a photo workshop. They raised 2 sons and followed their children to Odessa in 1975. Although the Sobibor revolt was not sufficiently prominent in the Soviet Union, in 1963, after 20 years, Simjon met Alexander Pechersky and other survivors of the uprising. They continued to meet until 1990, when Pechersky died and the Rosenfelds immigrated to Israel. Although the Nazis buried all evidence of the Sobibor camp and planted a forest there, archaeological work that began in 2007 revealed the exact location of the gas chambers in 2014. When Rosenfeld was informed, he said, "I cannot believe that they discovered them. The Nazis destroyed the entire camp. It is hard to imagine there is anything left there now." Over the years, archaeologists have unearthed thousands of personal items: rings, lockets, earrings, jewelry, perfume bottles, medicine bottles, and utensils. When Simjon Rosenfeld died on the 3rd of June 2019 at a retirement home in Rehovot near Tel Aviv in Israel, he was 96 years old and was the last known survivor of Sobibor. There were many tears shed for Simjon Rosenfeld. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.